to pay respect to the movement that is hip-hop, the people that create to express how that beat drop. The words of the silence telling stories for a cause. I'm thankful for the artists who stood up to spit how it was. I'm native and I'm peaceful, but I'm tripping like the voyage. Tired of the greed, deceit, destroying earth like we can make it without water or air. She ain't ours, we are hers, and we cannot compare. Our job is to preserve, though we don't deserve to remain. We can't contain our ego, don't live equal, need to reframe. Rich folks make systems of fear and hypocrisy while we subdue the margins of this so-called democracy. I'm native and I'm peaceful, standing rock hard like Dakota. North, south, bring east and west, we're gonna show up. Check your privilege and you'll come for your history and reflect. Don't confuse protect with protest, and instead use the platform for a cause and listen when the earth says, without me those lungs of yours are so gone. Without earth these lungs of ours are so gone. Think of the generations who will inherit this nation. Include them in our choices. It's our job to lift their voices. These generations feel the same except the lingo and the style. The struggles have built up, it's on the kids to change meanwhile. Brothers in the streets, sisters crying in the sheets. Mama's on the phone saying, what happened, baby? Look at this world we have created. We got needles on the streets. Little kids scared to speak. Hurt so bad it's hard to breathe. Tell me there's not a better way. Give me proof that there's not more to say. Show me all the work you've done. You don't know how far I've come. Should've told me at age 6 that my life was gonna change. People got me pegged for rude, but I'm just trying not to cave. Daddy left when I was 6. System held both of us. Mama played both parts. It broke both of our hearts. Flipped upside down, I've been kicked to the ground. Had to build myself back up to understand I will still fall. Not ashamed of all my past, it has made me who I am. Carry my team on my back and educate on this track. Our destiny is not to manifest anger and pain. Use the voice that you have to help create a better path. Mass incarceration to mass deportations. Police brutality stem from racist mentality. Can't you see the pattern? No dapple, no black snakes, no pipeline, racist hate, no costumes and no chains. Use any outlet that you love, stand up and make a change. Not for the money and the fame, for the generations we create. Think of the generations.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your presence. If you are not currently muted, I would just want to invite you to mute your mics. It sounds like, okay, I think I got them. Yeah, just invite you to mute your mics and just to drop in to get present. I also invited y'all to share in the chat where you're zooming in from. I love it. San Diego at Marshall Middle School, Hanford Elementary. Okay, I'm from Fresno. Really, we're gonna get into, okay, Fresno. We're gonna get into our grounding. And so whatever it took for you to get here, this is just an invitation to get present, to get back in your body, to take a few deep breaths. And so we're going to take 3 deep breaths together, and then we'll get going. So take a deep breath out. Just let anything out that maybe, you had a to-do list that's on pause for now. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Take another deep breath in and think about what you want to learn in this session, and let it out. And then our last deep breath in, just think about what you want to share with people. And on this last exhale, you can just let a deep exhale out. Whew. No one can hear you, well, unless your mic's on. And we are going to get into our next slide.
I can
continue to breathe
in every situation.
as you continue to drop into this present moment. Think about what you need in this space. Are you going to take care of yourself in this session? Maybe a nice beverage. I have my tea right here. and then we'll come back to the space.
I am sacred.
Remembering to honor your own needs, to honor what comes up for you in this moment. We're going to get into our agenda. All right, y'all. So we just did our welcome and our opening and our grounding. We're going to get into our community agreements. We'll also get into the role of culture, who are you activity, culture responsive teaching, levels of culture, an artifact activity, our best practices, and a closing. And one pro tip we want to share is that showing your agenda before you start is a trauma-informed best practice. It just lets folks know where you're going, and so they can know how to take care of themselves in this space. So at Girls Leadership, we have these community agreements that we use with our trainings and in various spaces. Usually we create them live, like if we were there with you, we'd be creating them together, and these are the ones that we've used for trainings across the country. So I want to invite someone to support reading this. Can I get a volunteer? You're going to hear me.
I don't mind reading.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So for our community agreements, we support all community members. We stay curious about new ideas and stories. We acknowledge the power of our words. We hold space for each other's truths. And we have patience and a sense of humor with technology, which I think is a very important one.
Yes, I was actually just about to ask you, like, which one do you think, you feel like is important? And I think, yeah, for us in this Zoom world, thank you so much, Brad. In the Zoom world, it's important that we have patience and a sense of humor with technology because something always happens. But we're able to, keep it calm and go with the flow. So thank you for that. We're gonna keep moving. So y'all, my name is Alie. My name is Alie Jones. My pronouns are she, her. I am a self-care advocate, writer, artist, and Creole mermaid. I grew up in Fresno and I live in Oakland. And these are just a few things that I really love. And so I wanted to share them. And yeah, I mean, I could talk to you forever about Janet Jackson and Doctor Who. And so I will pass it over to my co-pilot, Hénia.
Hello, good morning, y'all. I'm going to invite everybody, if you feel comfortable and if you're in a place where it's accessible to you, to turn on your camera so that we can feel like we're in a space together. I know we only have 90 minutes together to build some trust and build some energy as a community, and getting to see your faces if and when you can is part of that. My name is Hénia. I am the California program director. I use she and they pronouns. I'm French Algerian. I was raised in the Bay, moved to the Bay in 1993, but born in France, raised in Paris. I am a podcast host. I've dropped a photo of the podcast that I'm currently hosting. It's a podcast about storytelling, mostly about the stories that come from the margins that don't often make it to mainstream culture. I'm a community organizer. I've been doing racial, social, and environmental justice work for over a decade. I'm a facilitator and a trainer. I train other people to be able to train adults in these types of settings. I've been doing that for also over a decade, been working with youth since I was a youth. And I really believe in the power of those who have come before us, the aunties that have come before us. So you see on the left-hand side, you have an image of my auntie's hands and some photos that I've taken. I also want to acknowledge that I am tuning in from Oakland, California. Oakland is territory to the Ohlone people, specifically the Lijon Ohlone people. Oakland is called the village of Huchin. And if you're in the Bay Area, I invite you to check out the Sogorte Land Trust, which is an organization run by urban indigenous women, not all of them Ohlone, but all of them from the Bay Area. And also to speak of indigenous people in the present tense, right? So the first video that we shared, a good friend of mine, Kalina, whose people are Suquamish from up in Seattle, Washington, and what kind of work does it take to acknowledge where we are and then actually take further steps in educating ourselves whose territory we're on and how to move in a good way. So also shout out to the Black Panther Party, who obviously have a huge history here in Oakland, California. And we are Girls Leadership. We are an organization that uses SEL. By SEL, I mean social emotional learning, to develop leadership in young people and to support girls and gender expansive youth in tapping into the power of their voice. So everything that we do is from a lens of social emotional learning and building racial and gender equity. Our work is centered around 4 central values: authentic communication, courageous growth, equity, and some play. If we were here with y'all for a little bit longer, we'd probably have snuck in a little game or a little icebreaker, but with 90 minutes, we got to get straight into it. And we work with girls across the country. So, we work with some girls in Oakland, Sacramento, New York directly, but overall we impact about 120,000 girls and gender expansive youth per year. We work directly with them, but also we do this, right? So part of our work is understanding that we need to work with their primary influencers, their caregivers, their educators, the administrators in their schools, in order to support them in all the ways. And again, putting SEL at the center of building those leadership skills. We also really believe in building authentic, trusting, and transformative relationships between young people and the adults that they work with. And these are some of the girls that Alie has actually been working with here in Oakland, California. So with that being said, we're going to, again, if you haven't already dropped in the chat where you're tuning in from, please do so. If you know the native people of the land you're on, please give them a shout out. Really appreciate that. And also let us know maybe like how you engage with youth. What is your primary role in working with young people?
Yes. Thank you for that, Hénia. And yeah, like you mentioned, I'm in California. I'm a California program manager. I realized I didn't say that, and I work with high school and middle school youth. And so we're going to get into the role of culture. The role of culture is really the value and norms that connect us to a shared identity or community. And so that's the foundation of human interactions, its influences and practices that influence our worldview. So this is a personal reflection for y'all. What cultures are you cultivating? Is there a genuine and sustained sense of belonging? What choices are you making, and how do you reflect those values? Okay, we got Stockton, San Jacinto, Riverside, the Chumash people, Inglewood. Okay, Riverside is here. I love it. Central Valley is here. It just makes my heart happy. Okay, yes, and we'll move on to the next slide. So just giving yourself that time to think about who you are, what cultures are influencing you. Apologies, y'all, I'm in a room where the lights turn off, but luckily I have some natural lighting. Yeah, just thinking about who you are, you're going to have a quick moment to journal. And we're going to give you some time to journal and just kind of think about, excuse me, before we move on, give you some time to think about what you're cultivating. And so we'll give you a few minutes to be able to sit with these questions. Maybe you answer one of them, or you answer all of them, or you write them down to save them for later. And we'll just give you some time for that. You know, about 5 more minutes to write. If folks to feel they want to share, just think about that. All right, so start to wrap up your ideas, your thoughts. You can come back with it. Let's see, who would like to share out? So let us know what the question was, and then you can share your answer.
You know what? I don't mind talking again.
Brad's like, I'm back. Okay.
Yes. So I made a mistake. I didn't write down the question, but it was the first question.
Okay.
And so one of some of the things that I really work towards when I'm out at the expanded learning sites and stuff like that is as a TA provider and as a co-applicant for the grant, for the ACES grant here in San Diego County, like I try to be supportive for all the staff and support them with their personal growth.
Mhm.
So that's the culture that we try and cultivate. And then staff empowerment too, you know, showing those staff that they have the tools to expand and excel their programs, even if they don't quite realize it. Like the information's there, it's just practicing, putting those into practice. So those are some things that I try to develop with our culture.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Anyone else like to share? I know y'all don't have to be shy. It's okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I know my internet's kind of shady right here at school.
You're breaking up a
You can
little
hear
bit,
me?
but I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, sorry. The question was the choices you're making and how does that reflect your values?
Mhm.
Is that just your personal, what you do at work more?
Yeah, so it's really thinking about like who you are as a person, right? Like having that moment to do your own mirror work because that impacts how you show up at work, right?
Okay, so my personal opinion, the choices I make helping the kids is also helps me with my teenage daughter, because sometimes we don't, as a parents, we don't see that our kids may be going through the same things these kids are doing, but we're helping them and not helping our kids. So I take it in, I listen, and I also, whatever I learn and reflect from here, I also make sure that I take the values of making sure my daughter is also good.
Yes, thank you for that, right? Like our learning is multi-layered. The culture that I'm cultivating is one of respect, pride, control, self-control, and indomitable spirit. Thank you, Manuel. That is indomitable spirit. That feels like really charged and exciting. All right, so thank you so much for sharing. We are going to move over to this "Who Are You" activity that I was speaking about. And like I mentioned just now, just thinking about your own identity, your own mirror work, and the power of holding that space. You'll get into a room with one other person, you'll have just ask this question, who are you? And so you'll just think about what that means for you, and then you'll switch, and the person will answer the same question. There's no right way to answer this question. It's whatever is coming up for you is perfect. And so I think I have you all in rooms. Yep, I have you all in rooms, and I have one group of 3. So yeah, I think we're ready. Y'all ready? Perfect. All right, I'm opening the rooms. So the question is, who are you? Who are you? I think we have a few folks. Kelsey. A few folks who haven't gone to their rooms. Breakout rooms are so fun.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. All right, y'all. Just got our recording back going. So our questions are reflection just to think about, what did you learn about yourself through this activity? And the second question is, how comfortable are you with sharing parts of your identity and your culture with your girls, youth, students? And then the third layer to that question is, how comfortable are you sharing those same things with folks you work with? And so folks want to share and answer to one of these questions. Maybe someone I haven't heard from. It's so good to see all your faces. Yeah,
Okay, I'll go. I'll go.
Amy.
Well, I met with Laura, and we kind of had the same type of thoughts about ourselves, about, trying to be more mindful and present, because we all get pulled in a million different directions, and her especially. I'm like, wow, girl. But to try and relax and be more calm, and how comfortable. We were pretty comfortable sharing. And I work with middle school in the after school program, and I think with middle school, again, it's a different personality with those students, but you have to be honest with them.
Yes.
And you have to be honest, and you have to, if there's something that you're wanting to ask of them, then you have to be willing to share it. And if it's uncomfortable for them, then you need to back away, and it's uncomfortable, and let it go. So I think trying to be what you were talking about being authentic, and you have to be willing to share, because that's the only way middle schoolers trust you and relate to you. And, you get a lot of collaboration, and, it's about relationships.
Yeah, building authentic relationships based on you being yourself. That is really important. Thank you. Yeah, I think middle school is definitely that age where they're like, we see through it. We see through it. Yes, I love middle school too. They're sweet. Any other reflections, either about your comfort or what you learned? Y'all feel comfortable sharing these parts of yourself with your coworkers? Yeah.
Mine was with Manuel, and he comes from somewhere other than where I come from. So it was really nice to actually get to talk to somebody who's way more experienced than I am and has been doing this for a very long time. Me being really new into the programs, and me being so young, and he made me feel very comfortable in like expressing that I am here for a reason, and I worked for this for a reason and stuff like that. So he was very, very helpful, and I really liked talking to him.
I love that. Thank you so much, Autumn. I'm gonna take one more.
Oh, I'll go. Oh, oh, sorry. No, go ahead. My camera doesn't work though. Sorry. Okay, so I spoke with Miss Brittany. She was chatting with me because I know she's in a conference room with other people, but we were just talking about making sure that we bring positivity just around, especially to, you know, our students, yes, on a daily basis in general, but just to our students, because at least for me, my school site is in a low income Hispanic community. And, you know, a lot of these students go back home without, you know, love, or they don't have like that positivity. And, you know, I know how it is. I see it firsthand. So I feel like it's our job to make sure that we come, you know, with open arms and open hands, with a smile on our face, to, you know, just to see them smile, to see them laugh, to show them how much they truly mean, and what, you know, what kind of impact that they do make on us. And that, you know, doesn't just go for students. I feel like that just goes in general for everybody. It's just, you know, you don't know what people are going through, and why be ugly? The world's already ugly, you know? So I feel like for sure bringing positivity is definitely a key factor.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, it's important just to think about what energy you're bringing into spaces, right? Like what part of you are you bringing? I think I had one more person.
Yes, it was me. Well, I was just going to share that I learned about myself that I'm actually really comfortable sharing, you know, parts of my life with both my students and coworkers. Especially recently, you know, I was pregnant, you know, and my students loved that I was pregnant, and they wanted to know about the ultrasound, and they wanted to know if it was a boy or a girl and what his name was going to be. And, you know, after I had the baby, and I'm on maternity leave and everything, you know, I still get texts from parents, you know, from the kids saying like, how are you doing? And how is the baby? When are you going to come back? And so I personally love sharing that part of my life with my students, because I feel like it builds trust, and it builds rapport with them. And so I'm very comfortable sharing, you know, that part of my life with my kiddos.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it definitely, you know, depends on folks' like comfort level, and also just, yeah, like the connections and established relationships, right? Like what you're building on. And so thinking about how you're building. Thank you everyone for your responses. Back to you, Hénia.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And thank you for the patience with technology that Alie mentioned in the beginning, because sometimes breakout rooms, it's a whole mental gymnastics to make them work. So before we get into the next activity, we want to just talk about culturally responsive teaching, right? So you came to a workshop about culturally responsive mindset. So we're trying to get, you know, I want y'all to pay attention to the decisions that we've made and how we've created this workshop, because part of how we create a space is to try to really promote our creating our own culture and bringing you into that, right? Building trust with y'all in a short amount of time, and being able to have meaningful interactions and hopefully meaningful connections, which it sounds like y'all had in your breakout room. I also consider cultural responsive teaching to just be responsible, like that's just good teaching, right? And so before we get into actually exploring the different levels of culture, we want to just make a distinction into what is culturally responsive teaching and what it's not. So one of the main differences for us is really the mindset in how you look at everything, the systems, the relationships, the environments within which you're actually building, right? Within which your students are learning, within which your organizations are set up, and understanding that the first step is, who are we, right? So we started with what kind of culture are you setting in your spaces? What kind of culture are you setting in the classroom or whatever space that after school programs that you're sharing with young people, recognizing what your culture is, recognizing what, practicing cultural humility, also understanding that in order to show up in a good way, there's work, there's introspective work, right? There's work that we need to do in how we're going to show up into the space, because really, as Emily Stile, the founding co-director of the National Seed Project, says, half of the curriculum walks into the room when the students do. I'm going to say that again. Half of your curriculum walks into the room when your students do. Who are your students? How do your students learn at home? How do your students process information, right? How do your students relate to different modalities? How do they relate to different archetypes, right? What's their learning process? So in an hour and a half setting on Zoom, we're going to offer you breakout rooms. We're going to offer you an opportunity to drop things in the chat. We're going to offer you an opportunity to speak out loud. We're going to offer you an opportunity to journal, right? We don't fully know who you are and how you're learning, but trying to cater to different styles, right? Also, how are you really building authentic partnerships with your young people, right? So how are you meeting them where they're at? Before we challenge them with higher order thinking, before we challenge them with learning more things, who are they? Like, who are they when they walk into the room, right? And we believe that all of this, these practices are really integral when we're talking about having rigorous learning environments. Like, we can't expect them to go into any kind of rigorous learning on whatever subject it may be. We specialize in social emotional learning, but we know that y'all are coming with y'all are coming from lots of different places. And also, I used to run a lot of after school programs, so I know that sometimes you're the tutor, because they come to after school program, they got all the homework. So all of a sudden you're a tutor in math and science and English and all the things, right? And we're human. And so everything that we do starts from a place of emotions and trust and relations and what are they bringing into the space? What are they going home to? What just happened to them during the day, et cetera. I'm going to pause here before I go into kind of what we mean by multicultural education and see if there's anybody that has any thoughts or any questions around just our frame for multicultural education. Or sorry, culturally responsive teaching. Okay, and I'm going to give a shout out to Zaretta Hammond for her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. It's a book. There's also a website. Maybe Alie can drop that in for us in a second in the chat. If y'all want to actually dig deeper into this and in what, she really goes into like the nitty gritty and more like scientific part, like how to like use culture to scaffold cognitively so people can process new content. She also talks about how a learner's culture can really program our brains, right? So how do we process data? How do we build relationships? And I think the reason we want to make a distinction between what it is and what it's not is that often people get caught up with multicultural education. Oh, I'm bringing a lot of cultures into the room, right? I am bringing different holidays. I'm bringing different flags. I'm bringing different foods. I'm bringing different stories, right? Different customs, different types of clothing. And it doesn't have to be shallow, right? I don't want to say that those kinds of practices are shallow, but it does remain on a more conscious level. And I'm going to get into like the three like levels of culture in a moment, but that tends to not be fully well integrated into the curriculum. That tends to be something that's added on, right? That's something that's extra rather than actually integral to the learning. And it doesn't usually require any kind of intellectual or social emotional connection. And that's what we're trying to get at. What we're trying to get at is in order to be culturally responsive, we're building relational trust. We're using social emotional learning and their ability and how they learn at home to build authentic relationships, to dig deeper into our relationships, which is why we asked you, like, how do you set up your space and how comfortable are you sharing about yourself? And obviously we all have our boundaries, what we feel like sharing, what we don't feel like sharing, but how are you connecting and how are you sharing with young people in order to meet them on a deeper level? Any questions or any thoughts thus far?
I'm just over here nodding with you.
Thanks. All right, so we're gonna give you a couple of moments again as a way to honor different learning styles and different ways to process information. I'm going to actually let me share this, and then I'm going to send you into we're going to show you a little Jamboard. So this is a slide that we use actually in another workshop. We just wanted to share it with you as an offering. And I'm so sorry, there's noise outside. Hopefully y'all can still hear me clearly. I know Zoom is pretty good about, okay, cool. It's just me having to tune out the noise from the outside. But when we're talking about culture, we got to start with dominant culture, because that's the culture we're swimming in, right? So we cannot have any of these conversations about culture without understanding that the young people that we work with live in this world, right? Live in this world where if you are the closest to the circle, the middle of the circle, the closest to power, there's certain ways that you get to move through the world. There's certain things you have access to. There's maybe some space that you get in your life. There's some resources that you get in your life that are not going to be accessible to you the farther away you are from the center of the circle, right? And so we're not going to break down all the levels of systemic oppression or the levels of intersection or positionality. I do want to give a shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw for even giving us the term intersectionality. Black women contribute a lot to our thinking and to the way that we do our work and are not named enough. So want to make sure that she gets the recognition where recognition is due. And the reason also why that came up for her, right, is her own intersections, right? Her own intersections as a Black lesbian scholar in the legal field, and what that meant and how she was able to show up, and the kind of emotional labor and the extra work that she had to do day in and day out, right? And that like all goes back to our positionality. How do you get to move through the world, right? So we have certain levels of privilege. Most of us have certain levels of privilege and certain levels of oppression that gives us a way to move into the world, right? That gives us a way to even understand the world. So for me, I'm an immigrant, right? When I first got to the United States, I didn't speak English, right? So that was the first thing. It was really, really hard for me to even comprehend half the stuff I was doing in school because I didn't have the cultural references. And that's true for so many of our young people. Like we come from whole different cultures, whole different worlds, and yet everything that they're taught in school is through the lens of whiteness in this country, right? And so just all the pieces, they all come together. We're going to share with you this slide deck as a PDF afterwards, so y'all can go back to anything that really resonated. But we really want to pull the wisdom in the room, right? We want you to have a little bit of a space right now to process what may be coming up for you, maybe share some best practices, like how do you learn and better understand how your young people learn at home or in their communities. And maybe you've never thought about that, but maybe you have. I find that as somebody who's been doing youth work for 20 years and who's been doing like anti-oppression types of workshops in community for a decade, a lot of the stuff I actually know, but I don't know that I know. You know what I mean? I just don't have the words. So when I started looking at cultural responsive teaching, I was like, oh, wait, I kind of know what this is. I just didn't know what it was called, right? So are you already kind of thinking about how your young people learn at home? Are you already kind of thinking about what their life is like in the community outside and trying to mirror that in the spaces that you have? And maybe there's some challenges that are coming up for you, like just that you're thinking, right? Like around how am I going to instruct? What kind of routine? What kind of relationships do I want to build? So I know I've said a lot. This is like, we don't have a lot of moments in our workshops where we just talk at you, but in 90 minutes, we just had to get it in. But I'm going to share really quickly with you a Jamboard. So a Jamboard, if you've never used it, is a pretty easy tool. If you ever do like things online, I recommend it. It's a pretty cool tool for folks to engage with, and it's very easy to use. So if I wanted to share something, I would write share something, and then boom, it would just pop up as a sticky note, right? And so you're gonna have access to this Jamboard beyond this session. So this is where like you can share things and keep sharing with each other beyond this 90 minutes that we have together. But what is coming up for you when you think about culturally responsive teaching is our first slide. The second slide you can find by clicking up here. How can we learn about youth learning processes and styles? I think it's let me just fix it. And their learning process and their styles from their home life and communities. What feels challenging about adopting a culturally responsive mindset? And what is one thing that you'd like to reflect on further? So I'm just going to give y'all a couple minutes right now to just think about that and start populating this Jamboard. And if you have any questions or any things that you want to share, please come off mute. We would love to hear your voice. So don't feel obliged to go through each of them. Maybe there's only one that's resonating with you, one of these questions that's resonating with you. And just inviting you to share your thoughts. And I'm going to play a little lo-fi while y'all are doing it.
Oh wait, Hénia, you stopped sharing.
Now we're good.
Is it okay if I share something? Okay.
Yes, please.
Awesome. On Martin Luther King Day, we actually did, and I'm kind of proud of it. I kind of work on it, but we do a lot with social emotional. And we did the Amanda Gorman speech. And then after that, we played the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech. So, and then like what you're talking about, yeah, we do Dios de los Muertos, and yeah, we do all those, like you're saying, not superficial, but easy. Those are easy. Like you bring the food and all that, that's easy. And when we did this, it wasn't really like, we really didn't plan anything. It was just like, oh, we'll do this. And a student stood up and talked about how he had been called the N-word at one time. And it became this total like social emotional sharing thing. And we all were looking at each other like, okay, this is a teaching moment. We got to do something with this. And so how did that make you feel? How do other people in this room feel about that happening to you? And it was it was just something that just happened naturally, and we went with it. It was so beautiful. But I'm getting to understand what you're talking about multicultural and being, you have to be thoughtful, and it's not just the easy stuff. We have to really get into it. And another thing really quickly, they all liked Martin Luther King's speech better, which I thought was interesting because these are middle school students. How do you even relate to that time and that era? And they felt more in tune with his speech. And so then we started talking about, the time and how, what the type of speeches were and how Amanda's was different than his. It was just really, really interesting. But that was a really proud moment because I hadn't planned on it, and it happened, and I liked it. I liked it.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Yeah, I think what we're trying to get at is things are going to come up in the moment because also of the relationships that are there, and how do we keep building the relationships for things like this to come up in the moment. So sometimes you just got to throw your script out, you got to throw your activity out and go with whatever the room is asking for. And I do think that that's often a testament of the relationships we're building, that we're able to go there, right? Thank you so much. I'm going to move us back to sharing this screen. And, again, I really encourage you to keep coming back to this. I'm going to keep moving us along, but please come back to this. And thank you for populating it. I see that we have things on every page now. Really appreciate your offerings. And to bring it back to SEL, right? Just a quick, again, you'll get this in the slides, and so you'll be able to explore this a little bit more. But we really believe in SEL as being the starting point, right? The really understanding youth social emotional world is an entry point into relational trust and into getting into a deeper level. So again, not to say that we shouldn't be doing the multicultural, but we need to go deeper, right? We need to move from conscious to unconscious. And so in a minute, we're going to send you back into a breakout room that Alie's going to create for us in a minute. And before we go there, this is what we mean by the 3 levels of culture. And so we're going to share, you're going to create your own tree in a breakout room with one other person. So you're going to create a semblance of this, and there's no drawing skills necessary, y'all. Your tree can look however you need it to look. We just want to explore the 3 different levels, right? What we're trying to get at is we know the conscious. Again, the holidays, the food, the clothes, the hairstyles, the talk styles. Well, we have some thoughts about that. The songs, the art, the language, the games, right? Those are observable, right? Those are observable patterns. It has actually kind of a low emotional impact on trust, right? Then there's the subconscious. It's the unspoken rules. How do you handle emotions, right? What does personal space look like for you? And again, when you have a lot of different folks in the same room, we don't all have the same concept of time. I know that my concept of time is very different than the concept of time that capitalism has. Capitalism's time is very hard for me, right? Personal space. There's some places where personal space, it's cool to be close to each other. In the US, I understood very quickly, y'all got a bubble, right? Like US has a bubble. I didn't grow up with that bubble. I had to learn that, right? Different ways of handling emotions, eye contact. Some cultures eye contact is good, some cultures it's not, right? The nature of relationships, the tempo of work, all of the nonverbal communication, right? What being honest looks like. Oh, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give you the truth. Or, oh, I'm going to just be nice. And I'm just going to like curve around the truth because I was taught to never disrespect my elders. So no, the food is not good, but I'm not going to say that, right? And so you're starting to have a higher emotional impact on trust. Right? We're trying to move in cultural responsive teaching as much as we can between the subconscious and the unconscious. The unconscious is like, how do you make decisions? Right? How are decisions made? What kind of processes do you have for decision making? What are your concepts of self? What are your concepts of the world? What are your world views? What do you mean by kinship? Is kinship just blood? Is kinship not just blood? What kind of relationships do you build? Some of us have to build relationships beyond our family for just survival reasons, right? What is the notion of fairness? We don't all have the notion of fairness depending how the world treats us out there, right? Or the same sense of justice, right? What does it mean? Do you have a preference for cooperation or competition? Capitalism definitely has a preference for competition, right? What is your relationship to nature? What is your relationship to animals? What is your relationship to spirit or to the concept of a higher power? So I also want to name that what I've also seen, I want to name the risks of a person trying to tap into unconscious too quickly or in ways that become culturally appropriative. So I'm just going to say that as a disclaimer. Please always be aware of your positionality, of your identity, of what's right for you to bring in and what's not right for you to bring in. So for example, around words and language, we talk a lot about this, like you should not just talk the way your students talk as a way to bond with them. You should not be using language that is not appropriate for your own culture or your own identity as a way to bond with them, right? So I also just want to name that we can't just take this at face value, right? We also have to do our inner work. Right? And who are you and how do you get to move through the space, especially when you get to the unconscious level? Because you do have intense emotional impact, because that is a place where you could really build deep trust and also where you could really break trust, right? And so if you are not Native, if you're not Native American or indigenous to this place, you should not have a dream catcher in your classroom, or you should not be teaching young people to build dream catchers, right? That is actually really, really disrespectful to Native folks, right? So how else can you connect with folks on trying to connect with spirit without taking somebody else's spirituality, if that makes sense? And so now we're at the tree. In the original plan of the world, we're going to have you sit with your tree, build your own tree, listen to some music. Time is doing its own thing. So we're not going to do it that way. And instead, we're going to send you into a breakout room and we're going to invite you to just talk about this tree and talk about what do you have in the setting that you've already created with the young people that you work with. I believe everybody is working in some capability in an after school setting, right? So what kind of culture are you setting in your after school setting on a surface level, right? What are some things that you've brought on? What are you setting on a subconscious level? And what are you setting on an unconscious level? And if this is difficult, that's totally okay. Because this might be the first time you ever look at this tree. And I know the first time I looked at this tree, I was like, I don't even know what to put where, you know? So just take your time with it. Again, we're going to send this to you as a PDF so that you can sit with this as much as you want. We also invite you to do this with coworkers, right? Like maybe you take this and you bring it back to your workplace and y'all do it together, because we know that you're always co-designing and co-creating space with the folks that you work with. Any questions before we send you into a breakout room for a few minutes to try to build a tree together? I said that you want to add to. I know there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And we're going to have a little patience with technology again, just in case the breakout rooms don't work as smoothly as the thumbs up from Alie. So I think you're good.
We're good. I think I just have one person I'm not putting in a room.
And also, if you want, if you're able to, you can screenshot this before you go into your breakout room so you can still see it. You know, if you're on a Mac, you could do Command Shift and 4 and just screenshot this page.
Y'all got it?
Or if you want to take a moment to write. Or take a picture with your phone. I see you, Miss Brittany. You're like, I'm just going to take a picture. Yes, that is actually another great way to do it.
All right, y'all. I'm going to open up the rooms.
Oh, thank you. Let's just put it in. You know, we got some. Thank you. It's already in the chat. Let's go.
We're coming through.
I appreciate you.
Okay. Please let me know if you have any issues getting to your rooms. And then bottom. I'm that person who's in the Zoom room until the last minute because the conversation just get juicy. They get, they get a little like, we gotta dig into this.
Yes. All right, y'all. Is everybody back, Alie?
No, we're missing about 7 people.
Okay.
8. Look, they're like, let's just get our last few seconds. They have 10 seconds left though. And so yeah, just as they have that last 10 seconds, look at these questions for a moment. Okay. And now they're back. Welcome back, everyone.
All right, y'all. Welcome back. Thank you. And again, thank you for the patience and the sense of humor with technology. It always works. And for some of y'all, it was real smooth. For some of y'all, you had to come back in and out. Hopefully you're connecting in a good way. And the questions that we want to leave you with is, what was hard about adding items to your tree on the 3rd level of culture? What is something that you could see yourself implementing right away? Is there something that you could take from today, from your tree, from what other folks have shared that you could implement when you go back to work on Tuesday? And really, who's going to support you in following up and executing your plan? And I say this because it's really easy to have ideas and then be like, I need a champion, I need a cheerleader, I need somebody to just be there and be like, we're going to do this, and I'm going to be there with you every step of the way, or anything else that you notice. So we're gonna take some, if you have something to share in the chat, please do so. And maybe if there's like 1 or 2 people who want to share anything that came up for you around this tree of culture.
Hénia, one of the things that I talked about and that my last school that I worked at did is our district was, we took on a lot of the Somali refugees down here in San Diego, and then we have a large population of families from Iraq and the Middle East. And so what they started doing in 2017 or 18 was hosting a multicultural fair, where it was for 1 grade, I think it was 3rd grade, where the students would put it on for the whole school, and then they would get to teach and like bring in food and stuff like that about their cultures. And I think that kind of helped with a lot of the that understanding for the other students as well as.
Yeah. And so again, what we were saying earlier is that the multicultural education, there's still a place for it, right? Especially when you're dealing with people whose cultures are heavily misidentified, or that's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean? Like cultures where there's like a strong stigma, or there's strong stereotypes or strong discrimination, having the youth get to, show off their own culture is really important. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to share before I pass it back to Alie for our last? Yes, go ahead.
Something to share. Mine was identifying that every generation is different, and they all have their own different thing that they're doing along with their culture and everything, and each generation is different. That's what me and my partner were talking about, how the generations of how when I was younger, it was seen as a negative thing to dye your hair as a 3rd grader. But now in our generation, it's okay. And it's something that people look down upon because that's not a part of their generation.
Thank you so much for naming that. I think that is so important, especially in the times that we're in. The generation that we are holding today, these young people went through a pandemic as babies, this is a whole new world. We just had an earthquake that we've never seen the earthquake that just happened in Turkey and Syria is something that we can't even fully comprehend. That's what they're growing up in. And so yes, absolutely. And that there's wealth in all generations, right? Like again, the aunties, the uncles, they have so much to teach us, but the babies and young people, these children came with a mission. They have a lot to teach us as well, and also need a lot of care and support and space to process what's happening.
Definitely. Yes. Okay. So thinking about that, thinking about storytelling and the power of storytelling, the role of storytelling in the world and how we cultivate trust, building relational trust. We're going to get into artifact activity, and we are not going to go into breakout rooms, but just thinking about how relational trust is critical, just how it's critical to build space for students. It's also, it creates a space to be able to move past your own comfort zone, right? Like thinking about, like what you want to share and how you want to share it. So Hénia and I are going to model this activity that you'll be able to do with your students, and then I'll talk you through how we've used it in trainings and with our youth in a variety of ways. And so first, I'm going to tell a story, and at the end of my story, I'm going to leave an object. And I'm going to leave object, and then Hénia is going to pick up my object and tell us the story. Okay. So a few years ago, I was at a middle school and I was having a really rough day, like it was early dismissal day, snack wasn't on time, and students were getting a little crazy. Yeah, y'all know snack wasn't on time. So it was like, whoo. And I was like running all over, trying to make sure everybody was okay. Everybody had water. It was a hot day. One of my students came up to me and she's like, Miss Alie, you're like a bee. And I was like, what? She was like, you're a pollinator. You go around and you just make sure that we're all right in all these different ways. And she's like, you're a bee. And so I share that story because for me, culture is a garden, right? Any space I go into, it's a garden. How are we planting seeds? How are we pollinating? How are we holding space? And so what I'm leaving with you, Hénia, is a bee.
You really are a bee. Yes. So this one time at a staff retreat, last summer, actually, we have our office on Mills College campus in Oakland. For those of y'all who are from the Bay, lots of bees. There's just bees around. And I was during a staff retreat, we're doing an activity where we're going in on some pretty like deep emotional content. And I was in a small breakout with a couple of my coworkers and my big boss, like our big, the big boss at the organization, the CEO. And I started to feel something I was wearing these overalls that had, they're stylish, and so there's holes in them. And, I started to feel something in my leg, and I'm like, oh, this kind of hurts, but I am listening to my big boss tell a story. And again, the respect and the subconscious, you never cut off your elders. There's wisdom in elders. You sit respectful. And as it went on, I started to feel more and more pain in my leg. And finally had to be like, okay, wait, hold on, pause. Turns out I was getting stung by a bee. Luckily, I'm not allergic. I did have you have like a reaction, a physical reaction. And I was getting stung by this bee and probably could have moved out of the way or realized that the bee was caught in my pants, but I was, being attentive to the boss and to the wisdom that she was imparting onto me, which is a huge value. Like I really, like you saw in my initial picture, like I really believe in taking the wisdom from my elders and passing it through me and passing it on to the generations that follow.
Yes. And thinking of passing things on, what are you leaving for us in the next story?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking that too. What I would leave, probably like the wooden table that I just remember that wooden table we were sitting at. So I would leave the wooden table for the next person to pick up and tell the story.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And so this would continue. We've done this in circles with folks where you would just go around the circle and the next person would pick up the wooden table and tell us a story about the wooden table, right? Their experiences in different spaces and really just continuing, right? I've heard keys, I've heard suitcases, I've heard the most random things, a microphone went from poetry to karaoke, right? And so just thinking about how this is another avenue for you to be able to build trust, for you to be able to cultivate space for folks to be able to show up as themselves, right? We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. We've all heard stories about times before we were even on the planet, right? Before we were even born. So thinking about this legacy of storytelling and building as a way to get to that, that deeper level of culture building, right? Like you're building the space, the environment that you're in. It's not simply, thinking about heritage months and holidays, which are important to celebrate, right? They're important to uplift and honor. But being mindful of how you're doing that is so important. Okay, so again, we have some reflections that you weren't able to get into with this activity, but I just hope that you sit with this when we send the PDF, that you try this at a staff meeting with your students in different ways. Like, it's a nice icebreaker, right? Like, it can be, all these different avenues. I think that's what we love about it, that it can be molded in so many different ways. And it really just creates space for folks to share in the room. Also want to emphasize when folks need to pass and come back, holding that space for folks to be able to pass and come back. All right. Of
Can I add something really quick, Alie?
course.
Also, you can decide to create themes or not. You can let it be, it can go as deep as you want. And so it could be like funny stories, or it could be like, you can use it for a specific reason. You know what I mean? And so we've done it before where we did the in person, we did the tree of culture first, and we invited people to really think about the subconscious level. And then they did the artifact activity. So then they went in and they're like, oh, let me think about classroom setting and subconscious level of culture in the classroom, or whatever it may be. So again, you can choose to have themes. You could choose to do it as a big circle. Smaller circles is easier so that people can really get into their stories. And we usually don't give people a time limit to the storytelling. And so you may have one group that's crying, you may have one group that's laughing, you may have one group that's like taking notes for what they're taking away. And again, as Alie said, it can have a lot of different purposes for adults and young people.
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah. An example of that, I just want to quickly share, it was a teacher, she brought in like just an example of how she was advocating for students in space. And so, that was our frame of, how are you being a champion for students? And that was the frame of the discussion. And so, yeah, just reflecting for you, like, what choices did you make? As you go try this out, these are going to be great reflection questions for you to sit with. And then I'm going to share a few of our best practices. I'm going to share not all of them, but I'm going to share a few. And then just want to invite you all to like come back to this. We met with our programs team, which, like Hénia mentioned, is in California, in New York. And we were like, y'all, what are best practices for culture responsive teaching and how we show up in the space? And, really the top thing was that we have a mutual understanding, right? That we are able to explore and co-create rather than making assumptions about each other. And I think that's really important when we talk about understanding your own positionality and being able to identify your own culture, which is where we started off, right? We're like being able to have that mirror work to know like your beliefs, your values, and your awareness, and how that shapes how you view everything. And then, really just holding that space for being aware of who you are in this space, right? So if you're being positive, if you are the one who brings the snacks, if you're the one who brings the music, if you're the one who, makes everyone smile a little bit brighter that day, or has a great dad joke to share, just thinking about, what your special sauce is and how you show up in the world. And then we'll go to the next one. Yeah, so to doing research, I think, being in Oakland, it's important that, I'm aware of the history of where my students are, both in relation to where they are in the city, but also, like we talked about, like students who have been asylum seekers, students who are coming in from all over the world, and being aware of how I don't assume anything about who they are, where they're from, their cultures. Making an activity or a game, right, to be able to break down some of those stereotypes and remove that as like a space of holding, a space of holding what you believe to be true, and giving youth the space to have their own agency be honored, and really like honoring their contributions as independent beings. One thing I've seen a lot of is, being able to see youth as whole beings. They have whole experiences. They live lives outside of the classroom. When they come to school, they're not necessarily always focused on school because of what happened the night before, what happened that morning. And so being able to be gracious with yourself and with them, And that does mean breaking down power dynamics. That means seeing youth as partners in your learning. I love that quote that Hénia shared, that they're this other part of your curriculum. They are a core element to the success of, you know, anything you bring to them. And so yeah, being the last one I think is really important, especially dealing with like elementary age youth, I think I would say, is being aware of the timbre and tone of your voice. And so thinking about how you use your voice to indicate how you're speaking to someone. So does it change? Why does it change? That was really important for me working with third graders. I was like, I'm not going to be like, oh, hi, Maya, how are, like, you know, I'm not going to look, even my body language shifted, right? It's like, hi, Maya, like just, I talk to the young people as people, right? And they talk to me the same. And so really being able to just do some more self-evaluation. I think it's not meant to be critical. It's not meant to be accusatory. It's really just meant for us to continue to do this work. And so that's what I hope that you all continue to do, is just hold that space to keep doing your inner work. Thanks, Hénia.
Yes, yes. And one that didn't make it on the slide, but that we want to name for, you know, at your workplace, if it's accessible to you as a practice, is affinity groups. I don't know if y'all are familiar with affinity groups, but actually meeting with people who have a similar identity to you, whether that's on whatever marker of identity that may be, to work through some things together. You know, I know that sometimes people of color want to have their own affinity groups, and sometimes folks within the BIPOC community want to have their own affinity groups, right? Like Black folks want to have their own group, Indigenous folks want to have their own group, queer folks may want to have their own group. It really helps for people to understand their identity and their position and how they move through the world, whether we need to like be pushing to get some of our power back, or whether we need to be showing up as allies to other communities. So just a practice that we encourage. Some resources that we wanted to share. Again, you will have this in, I'll share this in a folder for y'all to have access to. But we do a lot of work with Sean Ginwright's Healing Centered Engagement, Dr. Dina Simmons, who started Liberated, which is a transformative SEL organization. And again, Zaretta Hammond are some folks that we use some of their work and some of their thinking in order to create this particular workshop. And as folks head out, we just invite you to let us know how you're feeling. So this is a checkout that we do with young people. We call Head, Heart, and Feet. Either one new thing that you thought of during the session, or that you're thinking right now, one new thing that you felt during the session, or maybe something that you're feeling right now, and something that you're going to do as a result of this session. So again, we opened the session in an intentional way. We had some music playing because we don't like an empty Zoom room when folks walk in. We had a grounding, right, to give you an opportunity to arrive. And as we walk out, we want to give you just an opportunity to reflect. And just, we're really grateful to you for the time and the energy. I know that Zoom is not the easiest, and I know we spend a lot of time on screens and it's kind of exhausting. So we try to make this engaging and, you know, try to give you opportunities to connect. Hopefully you made some new friends, some new folks that you can connect with beyond this workshop, and feel free to stay connected, with us as well. I could drop my email in the chat before we go. And Leslie, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say from the CAN family.
No, I mean, thank you so much. I was typing this in, but I wanted to say that I was definitely reminded of the adultism that plays out, and how important it is for us as adults to use that power to elevate young people, instead of just perpetuating some of the same behaviors we see that happen during the school system. So that's something that was coming up for me that I wanted to share. And so now, as you end this workshop, you can go ahead and join session 2. And in 15 minutes, And so you'll be able to join the second workshop at that time. And then after that, we'll have a closing in the main session.
Thank you for that, Leslie. And Hénia, we have one more slide if folks would like to join any other of our professional development offerings. You can scan this QR code, and we have some pretty incredible offerings coming up for $50. So that's a good price, y'all. And they're also like, they're a little bit longer, like the 2-hour online. And so just want to present that as an offering. Thank you all so much for your presence, your patience, and for sharing, for your vulnerability, for your courage. And we hope that you take this with you as you move on to your day-to-day, with your students, with your coworkers, with yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll probably share an evaluation link with you, Leslie, if it's possible to send that to folks as a follow-up, just in case. I know y'all do your own, but feedback is always a gift for us if we can get some feedback from folks who attended.
Yeah, we have our feedback form, but it's one that we're gonna share at the end of the conference.
Okay.
And they have the opportunity to, plug in which workshops they attended today.
Oh, okay, perfect.
But yeah, if you want to send me anything, and then we can add it into whatever we send out.
Sounds good. Enjoy the rest of the symposium, y'all.